to transform sub-Saharan African nations into a major shared economic powerhouse, it is important to examine and adapt real-world experiences that have proven effective elsewhere. In my recent book, Shared Prosperity, A Path Forward for Sub-Saharan Africa, I explore and discuss a case of Japan, among others, as an interesting example. Why is Japan such an interesting example? In 15 years after World War II, less than 2 decades, Japan became a leading economy in East Asia, not to say in whole Asia, and the second largest economy in the world behind the United States of America. This remarkable turnaround prompts me to ask the following questions. What factors fueled Japan to rise again? How did a country that had experienced the most powerful weapon in the world, a bomb, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, was able to become one of the most powerful economies in the world? What lessons that emerging economies in sub-Saharan African nations can learn from this experience? There are three factors that I have come into consideration that were at the center of Japan's rise again. First, the US push. Let's remember, after World War II, Japan was occupied by the Allies, mainly the United States of America, under the leadership of General Douglas MacArthur. Though that General Douglas MacArthur did not have a capitalist perspective on Japan's economy, he relied on an American venture capitalist, William H. Draper, who saw Japan's economy as beneficial to the US, but also to the rest of the world. So here, two sub-factors came into perspective that accelerated the US push. First was the Korean War. Let's remember that the Korean War broke out after just 2 years after World War II, and it was perceived as a proxy war between the US and the Soviet Union. And the US was obliged to lift up some punitive measures that she imposed upon Japan's technology or industrial sectors, such as munition manufacturing industry. And this industry was allowed to manufacture weapons that were used for Korean War. And Japan did it. This industry throve again. The second factor was the expansion of communism from the Soviet Union, which was mainly backed by China. The US saw this expansion as a threat to its national security. Therefore, it saw Japan as a strategic position to restrain this expansion, not only in East Asia, but also in Asia as a whole. So the US helped Japan to build its economy. And Japan, of course, took advantage of this favorable context. They just did it. The second factor, income doubling plan, which was invented by a Japanese economist, Osamu Shimomura, who is considered the father of the Japanese economic miracle. So let's remember after World War II, this Japanese economist traveled across Japan. He saw the work ethics of Japanese workers. At the end of his travels, he concluded that capital and investment in a private sector in small or large companies was necessary for Japan to become one of the most powerful economies in the world in the next 10 years to come. And this plan was executed by Ikeda Hayato's government. So here, two sub-factors came into perspective. One, the manufacturing industry factor. So the Japanese government officials urged business leaders and engineers to study and copy technology that was used overseas, such as in Ford, Detroit, Michigan. And many of Japanese business leaders and engineers bought Western machines as prototypes to develop their own machines and adapted them to the reality of Japan. Another sub-factor was the technology factor. Let's remember during World War II, Japan had developed military technology from the second faculty of engineering, Tokyo Imperial University. So the Japanese government officials urged engineers who used to work in these factories to transfer their skills into the spheres of social life. So, for example, the technology that was used for gun science now was used to develop cameras, and it grew into a leading export industry. Engines developed in military aircraft were applied to automobiles. Vibration control technology was used to enable the Shinkansen, known as the bullet train, to travel at 200 kilometers per hour. As a result, companies such as Mazda model, Nissan model, Sony, Hitachi, and many others emerged and fueled Japan's economic growth. Finally, the Japanese people's willingness to thrive again or to become great again. Let's remember the world laughed at Japan after World War II. World War II brought shame and humiliation to Japan. And Japanese people now had to keep their spirit of combat and transfer that spirit of combat into economy because they knew the answer was no longer military, the answer was economy. So the past defeats became the case studies or experiments to develop their own people into creative personalities. The past defeats were superficial compared to the willingness to bounce back with unusual strength and hope. Japan did it. They dug into the entrepreneurial resilience, creativity to become one of the most powerful economies in the world. So, emerging markets in sub-Saharan African nations can and must learn some valuable lessons from Japan's case study or example. My name is Dr. Masachs. I am a social scientist researcher, a speaker, and the author of 4 books, including my recent book, Shared Prosperity, A Path Forward for Sub-Saharan Africa. My research has been around conflict or adversity as a catalyst for entrepreneurial change, creativity, business leadership, and success.